Hey, what's up, and welcome to this episode of EST, the podcast for established church pastors by established church pastors. I'm Josh.
I'm Sam, and we're going to be talking about something fun today, something I consider fun, something
Yeah,
you're
I like them.
doing right now, whiteboard
Huge
sessions.
results. Huge results right now. Yeah.
Well, you told me. So you told me people are like calling you. Your pastor buddies out in Texas are calling you, and hey, how are you doing these things? It seems successful.
hmm
What does this look like? And so we figured, let's just tell the world about it. Josh is
Whiteboard sessions. Yeah.
succeeding. He's winning. Let's tell the world about it.
Yeah. The conversation went a little different than that, but yeah, that's essentially what we're doing.
I'm just
So we're going to
propping
talk
you
about
up, my
these.
friend.
Yeah. So what's our first sponsor, though?
Yeah, well, the first sponsor is who is typically our first sponsor, Church Teams. They've been with us a while. You should go be with them.
hmm
Boyd Pelly is the co-founder. We have to bring Boyd back on. It's about time to do that again, to talk church technology, because, man, that guy knows his stuff. I mean, he absolutely knows his stuff. But Boyd leads the company, and they can help you with church management software, whether it be texting or text to give, whether it be check-in or scheduling, whether it be something even more sophisticated like process management. I mean, they do it all. So you get value without compromise. You get world-class technology for every size church. They've got a scalable pricing model that will work for you. Their pricing is excellent. So go to est.church. That's where you can get their trial run. Reach out to them. They'd love to talk to you if you have questions. Again, est.church to go check out Church Teams. All right.
That's right. All right.
Whiteboarding.
So,
So
yeah.
let's define this first, and then we'll talk about
Okay.
how you're doing it. So a
Yeah.
whiteboard session is a technical term. It's often used in the business world, although it can be used in nonprofit world and church world too. But in essence, what a whiteboard session is you get a team together of people, a group of people. It can be small or large, and you basically just have a lengthy amount of time. I'd say usually around 90 minutes, an hour to 90 minutes, where you either pose a specific question, like, hey, what can we do better? If we could restart our church all over again, what would we be doing? What would we not be doing? And you allow people just to chime in. So it can be started with a question, or you can just say, new ministry effort. We got funding. We got $100,000 from somebody, which would be awesome, right? What are we
Yeah.
going to do with this money? And you have a whiteboard session. So it's a collaborative meeting that's open ended. Sometimes it'll have an action item, but many times it doesn't. And it's a meeting where everyone in the room kind of has an equal voice. And a lot of times it's done on a whiteboard. You're actually writing stuff on a whiteboard. So that's where the whiteboard session the terminology came from. But Josh, you're doing
Yeah.
whiteboard sessions in your church, sort of like that. But tell us your story about these sessions. Like, what are you doing, and why have you seen such success with it?
Yeah. So if you're going backwards, I was about to take this church, First Baptist Louisville, and from my experiences in Arkansas, primarily, there were just so many topics that I wanted to talk to the whole church about, and there's about 8 to 10 of them, just topics that they don't come up in sermons. It's not like you're going to have a conversation like this in a sermon. Sermons are not interactive. And so even though I could stand up and just preach at people, I wanted it to be interactive and interacting with one another, interacting with the topic. And then on top of that, there's just no other really good part to kind of pastor. When you think about this, like the church understands the preaching moment, but the church really largely doesn't understand church work, like how it works, how the nuts and bolts of church. Everybody that goes to seminary, they always about like 3 semesters in start going, there was so much more about church work that I just had no idea about. And that's good. So I want to loop them into that. And so what I did was I just came up with about these 8 topics, and I don't have them right here in front of me. One of the topics is similar to what you were just sharing there, Sam. What would if First Baptist Louisville was to succeed? What would that look like to you? What does that look like to me? And here's some of the things. Well, let me talk about some other things. How Josh King approaches preaching, how Josh King approaches pastoral care. That's so the topic is really preaching or pastoral care or pastoral counseling. Another topic that I wanted to talk about is like the diverse sort of layers to a pastor or a minister. We are, I am a dad. I'm also a pastor, but then I'm also the leader of a large nonprofit. Those are three things that I am. And so when you're talking about these topics, what I'm trying to do, and Sam has an article on this very topic. You can find it over at Church Answers. We'll link to it
Yeah, I'll link in the show
somewhere.
notes.
Yeah, leading a whiteboard session. And it's got some of these things broken down as well. To be completely transparent, I had not seen this article before I came up with this, but he says be visual, discuss. I love those topics. What I'm trying to do is I'm coming up with questions. So when we talked about the idea of how Josh King approaches preaching, the very first thing that I did was have everybody at their tables, and we've got about 200 people coming to these, 160 to 200. So we'll have these tables, and I said, at your table, discuss what you think is necessary to make a great sermon. And so they all did this, and I allowed them like 5, 6, 7 minutes. Then we had somebody roam around with a microphone, and we said some of those, and I wrote them down on the board. And this is a great time for you as a pastor to show some of your personality. You get to joke around, you get to mess with them, push back on their answers, that sort of stuff. And then I said, well, this is how I approach preaching. And it gave me an opportunity to talk about how I plan out a year in advance, how I don't let the news cycle dictate what I'm going to preach, how I don't get political in my sermons, some of these things, and just say from the beginning, you may want me to, but I'm not going to. And that's how I approach this. And so another thing we do with the whiteboard sessions, I'll just say briefly, is I've started them off by saying, this is just a conversation. We're just having a conversation. There's no reason for you to get mad. There's no reason for me to get mad. I'm going to share my opinion. I want you to share yours. We're not voting on anything here. But since I'm new, it really helps the vast majority of our church, or a large chunk of our church, begin to see that's the way that Josh does it. He's not saying that it's bad or good. It's just the way that he does it. And he respects that there's other ways to do it as well. So those are kind of how I'm approaching it. I'm doing mine just scheduling wise every other Sunday evening at 4:30. We're not really advertising them. We're just telling people that we have these. But I'm interested, Sam, from your perspective in the business world, and then also as a pastor, what would you say is like a number one key factor in like making these things successful? What could I do to make mine even better?
Yeah, a good whiteboard session is encourages people to think out loud with freedom. So it's it's a bit of a cliche, but hey, there's no bad ideas here.
Mm-hmm.
There are bad ideas sometimes, and even in a whiteboard session, there can be bad ideas. But you want people to be free in their thoughts, and you want people to just be able to throw things out there, to think out loud. So it's a
Mm,
highly collaborative environment in which people feel the freedom to speak up about even crazy stuff, even if they know it's crazy. Like, hey, this may be a crazy idea, but
right.
sometimes that's where you start getting somewhere. When someone goes, you
Mm,
know what, that is crazy, but there's some truth to that, and here's where it's a snowball effect from idea to idea to idea. And it's an exercise that enables you to come up with way more creative ideas than you would have been able to do on your own. And I
hmm,
also think that this does not need to be done digitally. It needs to be done with people in the room. You cannot have a whiteboard session over Zoom. It just does
mm,
not work. So don't
mm.
even attempt to do it digitally. This is where you need to have discussion, where you need to see mannerisms. You need to be able to see body language completely. And the head and torso just ain't going to do it on a Zoom call. So if you do
I
these, don't do them digitally.
Yeah. Yeah. I had several people because they're kind of popular. People want to be with the new pastor, and After the first one, people were like, he's talking about some stuff that like we've never thought about, and so they gained some momentum. Um, there's just all sorts of cultural reasons why I think these are good ideas. They just really, uh, I don't know, they just bond you with the people. And afterwards, I just stand around and talk to folks and they share their ideas and things. Now, we did have such a good draw that people were like, will you please put these online? And I fought it for a couple times. This last one, I set my phone up and like Sam's saying, literally, I just kept saying, you got to be in the room, you got to be in the room, you got to be in the room. And I did not tell anybody I was going to do this, but we have a closed Facebook group and it was just there. And like, so I was broadcasting live and I would lean in and I would say, hey, while the tables were talking, I would say, hey, on the comments there, drop your couple suggestions that you think. And I would read those out loud. So there's a little bit of interaction, but I had a bunch of people say, yeah, it's way better in the room. I'm glad I got the information, but it's way better in the room. But from my perspective, since I'm not really trying to create or collaborate towards a new idea, I'm trying to more share and shape a culture. There was a benefit to passing those out or doing it digitally. I'll also share three quick things that I've started doing in these that are helpful. One of them is that I start since the first one, the second one and on, I start with saying, let me share with you a couple things that we talked about last time, a couple things that I learned listening to you. And I will just, they're like bullet points. I heard you say this. I learned from you this. I think that's a really great posture to have and to say, these are some things I learned. A second thing that we've done is we have share some win times, and we have the person with the microphone walk around, just share a few small wins that are happening in the church. And that's a great thing to give people the chance to say, hey, my nephew came to church for the first time, or my neighbor accepted Christ, or our small group had to pull in new chairs, that kind of thing. It gives them a voice and a time to share those wins. And what I always say is like, hey, listen, I want you to share these on social media. Go post these same things on social media. And if you heard somebody say something tonight that really excites you, get out of here and gossip about it. Go out and tell everybody you know about this really great thing that's happening at your church. So you can obviously see some maximizing benefits to those two ideas. The last thing that I will share that we're doing is we're in a big room. It's kind of our fellowship center, and there's like 8 people to a table. And I've started one off. I'm going to start the next one off the same way. And I say, all right, everybody stand up, get your stuff, and go sit with somebody you do not know. And so even though these are mainly members of the church that have been here for a long time, they don't know each other. And I use that as an illustration to say, you may think you know everybody in your church, but you don't. And you may think you know what everybody wants with worship or preaching or small groups, but you don't. I had a lady this Sunday come up to me and she pulled a little note out of her Bible and it had 8 names on it with phone numbers and emails. And she said, this is from the first whiteboard session. These are 8 new friends I made. They're all been members of the church. And we've connected now since just moving seats and connecting with 8 other people. She said, I've been going to church with these people for decades. I had no idea who they were. And now we're buddies. And so those are a couple things you can just infuse some really good culture building things into this format. And all 3 of those you cannot do in a sermon. So I really think it opens up the door for some more collateral change.
Yeah, that's really good. So it's a couple things here. We actually have part of our standing agenda with our staff meetings that are called high fives. And you called it wins. We call them high fives. So who gets a high five? And it could be somebody in the room because this is a staff meeting, or it could just be a church member. If it's a church member, we'll make sure to reach back out to them and say, hey, you got a high five at our staff meeting. Thanks for doing whatever you did.
That's cool.
So we call those high fives. The scope of what you're doing is larger than most whiteboard sessions because you're doing it with the whole church. You're kind of breaking down the whole church into these groups of 100, 200, which I think is helpful. And I think it's a good way to go. But a whiteboard session a lot of times can just be your team. It could be just a ministry. It could be your staff, if you have a staff. It could be your deacons, if you have deacons. It could be your elder board, your trustees. It could be, hey, I'm in the children's ministry. There's 10 leaders. Let's talk about how we can do children's ministry better. And you have a whiteboard session about that. Part of what I'm judged by Well, that sounds so harsh, but what I'm held accountable to by the church is I'm supposed to have a quarterly whiteboard session with my team. So once a
Oh, wow.
quarter, yeah, we have these sessions where usually there's a question like, how do we do outreach better? What are we what should we stop doing? What should we start doing? So it's kind of a broad question, but that's how these whiteboard sessions go. But we do them quarterly. I think weekly or monthly is probably a bit too much, like on an ongoing
Mm,
basis. You don't need
mm,
a weekly whiteboard session. You need a weekly standing agenda if you have a weekly meeting. But I think quarterly or like twice a year is probably a good pace for like how often do you do whiteboard sessions? You're doing them on the front end to set people's expectations. I mean,
right.
that's
Yeah.
very wise. So if you're a new
Mm,
pastor, listen to Josh because you only got that shot one time. And what
mm,
Josh has done is people that go feel like they know you better.
right.
They feel like they have a voice. And I feel they
Hmm.
do. I mean, they do know you
They
better. They
do.
do
You're
have a
right.
voice.
Yeah.
You're showing right up
Mm,
front, we're a larger church, but you have a voice and I want to be connected to you. And here's
right.
how that happens. And so you're dismantling any sort of preconceived notions, good or bad, about you. And you
Hmm.
are resetting those expectations with like, here's who I really am. And that's
Hmm.
extraordinarily important. If you study leadership and leadership theory, there's it's called projection. People will project things on you, rightly or wrongly. Sometimes they
Hmm.
think the world of you. They've projected this image on you. They think you're, Adrian Rogers or, W.A. Criswell or name your favorite
Right.
Southern Baptist pastor, right? That's who he is.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
they think those things of you, and inevitably you're not those things, and you're going to disappoint them. Sometimes
Right.
people project negativity on you. The last pastor was terrible,
Hmm.
so this new guy must be terrible too.
Hmm.
What you've done is you've taken all of that out of the equation through these whiteboard sessions and allowed the church to have a proper view of you, which is so much better. You don't
Hmm.
need to pretend at all. Just be who you are. Let the church know who you are. You can do it in a way that won't hurt your leadership. I think this is a very wise thing to do on the front end, and to do it with the whole church
Hmm.
is not something that I've heard done before, but I think that it's a good move for most churches. What
Yeah.
has been some of the successes that have come out of this so far, and how many more do you have to do?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how many more we have to do. Because I just kind of set them out every 2 weeks. I get a reminder. I look at the next one, and honestly, listener, I'm telling you, the topics I thought through those, and I was like, just try to narrow it down to the top 10 things that if I could have a heart to heart with every member of this church about this topic, then what would it be? And so I came up with those 10 things. So I think we've done three. So it'd be about seven more, and it's every other week. So it's only going to last a few months. So that's going on. Besides just the getting to know the members, getting to know one another, um, some of the wins have been. We talked through communication strategy. So I did a whole big kind of like the open ended. I said, hey, before we leave, I just want to share something we're working on here, and it's a communication strategy change that we did. It was a really good way to get everybody in the same room and share some stuff. I passed out a piece of paper, so that was a real win. Our new communication strategy has just taken off. Not a single complaint, just a lot of really good buy-in. I loved that. Another win is just the like I said, afterwards. I sit on the stage front. Like I said, it's our fellowship hall. It's not a formal setting, but I sit there and they come up and they just line up and they want the conversation gave them ideas that they want to share with me, and they share them with me, and so that's a good thing. The other thing that was unintentional but I'm liking is there's a common vernacular that's growing out of these. I have certain ways that I say things. I have certain words that I say things. And I'm able to help them understand those and see those. One example is our church is more of a formal looking structure, two steeples, a bunch of columns. It looks like what you think of when you think of a Texas suburb First Baptist church. And they refer to what I call lobbies, they refer to them as atriums. And I've just kind of helped them see that like people who don't go to church or grew up in church, they don't know what an atrium is. We don't use the word atrium. So I refer to one as the big steeple and one as the little steeple, because that's the main. That's what they are. And I
Big
said, look,
steeple lobby, little steeple lobby.
yeah, I mean, we've even gotten to the point where we just call it little steeple, like it's that area underneath the little steeple, and so that's starting to catch on, and it's permeating out through. And I noticed it this morning. Somebody referred to Big Steeple. They said we said it over in Big Steeple. I've only been here 2.5 months, and that's already caught on as language, and I'm happy about that. If a guest was to come to our church, and we said we want you to go to the North Atrium, there's a possibility they have no idea what we're talking about there. But if we said, I'll meet you at Big Steeple, you can't even pull on our campus without knowing exactly what I'm talking about. And so that permeating of a common vernacular is happening because I'm having off the cuff, not planned conversations with everybody. And I try to be real personal. So when somebody has the mic and they're talking, I talk back to them. I'm looking at them. I'm relating to them. And so that really opens up that door for that kind of conversation.
Well, you have a Big Steeple, little steeple. We have a Big Sam, little Sam here at West Bradenton.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm little Sam. I'm 6'3". I'm 6'3".
Oh, wow.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not a big dude, but I'm not small. I'm certainly not small.
No, not short.
I'm not short. So I'm 6'3", but Big Sam, he's like 6'9". So he gets,
wow.
Everyone calls him, we say, oh, Sam. And there's a gentleman, another gentleman at our 8:00 service who plays the organ. His name Sam too. So he's Music Sam. Then you have Big Sam, you have Little Sam, and I'm Little Sam.
Oh, I love that.
Big Steeple, really Little Steeple, Big Sam, Little Sam. There you go. How about that episode? How to lead a whiteboard session with your church. One of the things our sponsor, Upward Sports. Upward Sports is best in class. They are the world's largest church recreation ministry. They do this better than anyone else. Whether you have a gym or a field or a parking lot, they can help you. They will use sports as a bridge into the community. And not only do they have a great team to help you, they are offering, this is exciting, they are offering a 2024 sports startup grant for $500. So if you go to upward.org/churchanswers, you schedule your call, tell them, hey, King and Rayner sent us them, well, EST, they'll know what that is. You get that $500. So they're sponsoring this show. Wow. They're going to give everyone $500 to get their sports ministry started. I just think this is an incredible offer. Go to upward.org/churchanswers to take advantage of this offer. Now is the time to start thinking about camps and leagues and all the things that you want to do. And it's fun. Of course, it's sports. But the big picture here is they will help you do outreach in your community in a way that will connect with the neighborhood and in a way that will get your people engaged. This is one of the best programs you can do. So go check out Upward at upward.org/churchanswers.
Yes, thank you so much for listening. I do want to end the show with a personal note, and I don't say this enough, but Sam and I both feel the same ways about our churches, and just talking about whiteboard sessions and that sort of stuff. I just am very thankful for First Baptist Church Louisville, and so if they're listening to this down the road, it's just been such a pleasure to lead a church, to converse with a church that truly loves and respects my position. I haven't had to earn anything; they're just gracious and kind. So that's a good thing. And I know Sam feels the exact same way about West Bradenton. So thank you so much for listening.
I do. I don't know that anyone's listening to me anymore except for Miss Margaret. Miss Margaret, I love you. My wife doesn't even listen to this show, but Miss Margaret does. Miss Margaret is the greatest person on the planet. I love you, Miss Margaret.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next week.
Upward Sports equips churches to run self-sustaining sports ministries in their communities. Whether you're a sports fanatic or on staff at a church, Upward Sports will give you all the tools you need to run a first-class sports ministry that allows you to reach families in your community. Upward Sports offers basketball, soccer, flag football, cheerleading, volleyball, baseball, and softball through league and camp offerings. At Upward Sports, we want to help your church make a difference and give you increased opportunities to share the gospel. Learn more today at upward.org/churchanswers.